Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Would you like to have a cup of coffee? Viola asked. No, I'm in a hurry. I'll breakfast at work, Ciro replied. Viola looked closely at her husband. He had been refusing to have breakfast at home for a long time, and she didn't know why. I made you a delicious breakfast, your favorite pancakes. You love them so much. Maybe I can pack them for you to take to work. Viola smiled, hoping her care would please her husband. But her expectations were not met. Ciro sighed irritably. Why are you making things up? I've never taken lunchboxes to work. Do I look like some school kid? Do you want people to laugh at me? I understand that you don't even think about it, but I advise you to be a little smarter. I've outgrown the age when my mom used to make me breakfast for school. Besides, I don't even like pancakes anymore. It's a thing of the past. We have a great cafe where you can order any healthy and nutritious dish, and pancakes have nothing healthy in them. I suggest you not indulge in them too much, or you'll have even more problems with your figure than you have now. Viola looked at herself in confusion, examining herself from all angles. What was wrong with her figure? She didn't seem to be overweight. Ciro picked up his spacious bag where he kept important papers and documents. He quickly glanced at himself in the mirror, carefully examining every detail of his outfit. Smoothing out non-existent wrinkles on his pants, he adjusted his tie and smirked satisfactorily, with a slight smile on his face. Damn, he was pleased with himself. Ciro grabbed his wallet, phone, and car keys. Without even looking at his wife, he curtly said goodbye. All right, I'm off. Don't wait for me to come home early today. We have a meeting, and the boss will tear everyone apart. And as the most responsible and perfect employee, I'll have to calm him down. And Ciro left. Viola stood by the window, watching her husband as he drove away, absent-mindedly tracing her finger along the rim of her cup. Her gaze froze. Her husband had already left, but she continued to stare at one spot. She was still thinking about what Ciro had said. Did she have some issues with her figure? Well, she wasn't as slim and toned as she was in her youth, but she wasn't 20 anymore, after all. Okay, she wasn't old yet, only 38. But it's important to consider that she doesn't lead such an active lifestyle anymore as she used to. She's a homemaker, staying at home, cooking, cleaning, suffering from idleness. So what? She's not like other women who need to spend endless hours in beauty salons to feel more confident. She's content with the procedures she does at home herself. Viola jolted from the sudden phone ringing. She picked up the receiver and said, "Hello." But there was silence on the other end once again. They were silent once again. Viola began to lose her patience. Who was playing with her? Who was bothering her? If you call again, I will file a police report, and they will track you down anyway. Then there was a dial tone. Viola hung up the phone and banged the receiver on the table. She had had enough. What did they want? She had mentioned these calls to her husband, but he brushed them off. Don't pay attention, there are many fools in the world. Maybe someone from work is playing a prank. I have several competitors who would love to have the reputation I have and take my place, but it takes years of hard work for that. Don't let it bother you, Viola. Ciro worked hard to build his reputation. Medicine wasn't the most lucrative field in the beginning, it was a matter of luck. Ciro started as a male nurse and worked nights at the emergency department while studying at university. The job wasn't the best, but he was determined. Later, he became a medical assistant and eventually a doctor after graduating. However, he didn't enjoy working in such a place. The salary was low, there was plenty of work, and no free time or room for growth. In the hospital, Ciro met a patient who later became his wife. Her name was Viola. She fell in love with the young surgeon, and he loved her too. They quickly got married, and Ciro quit his job at the hospital, and they moved to another city. Thus began Ciro's challenging journey as a doctor. He changed several workplaces, but none of them satisfied him. Being a surgeon was a promising profession, but only if you worked in the right place, and Ciro hadn't found that right place yet. The family was always struggling financially, and having children was out of the question. Ciro would get angry whenever Viola brought up the topic. "Why children, Viola? Do you realize what you're saying? We can barely make ends meet ourselves. And if a child comes along, you'll go on maternity leave, and what will we do? I can't work around the clock. People need rest, you know. I'm not a robot to perform surgeries without a break. And please, let's not talk about children anymore. It only upsets me and makes me angry. I'm not feeling great, you can see that, and you with your suggestions." Viola stopped bringing up the topic after that. The couple hoped for better times. Viola supported her husband as best she could, and Ciro was grateful for her. Not every woman would share in their husband's hardships and sacrifices, but Viola did it out of love for her husband. Isn't that what a wife should do? The situation changed about 5 years ago. During a conference in another city where Ciro was sent on a business trip, he met a renowned surgeon known throughout the country. Although they were not acquainted, Ciro decided to take a chance. He approached the surgeon himself and introduced himself. The confident young doctor impressed the professor. Ciro reminded him of his own youth when he had to work tirelessly to earn his authority and high position in the medical community. The professor offered Ciro a chance to move to the capital, where he could find him a good position. Ciro eagerly seized the opportunity. Viola didn't even have a right to speak. Her husband didn't ask for her opinion. She quit her job, and they simply moved to the capital, where the professor arranged for him to work at a prestigious and renowned clinic. Ciro Santos began working in a highly prestigious position. And then the money started flowing into the family. From the beginning, Ciro gained the trust of the clinic owner, Emilio Navarro. The young surgeon excelled in the operating room thanks to his experience in various hospitals where he had to operate one patient after another. He had honed his skills and gained invaluable experience. Such doctors were rare. Everyone tried to land prestigious positions right after graduating from medical school, but Ciro had seen a lot during his practice, and now any surgery was within his capabilities. Very quickly, Ciro and Viola became wealthy. They bought a nice mansion and had good cars. Viola no longer had to work. Ciro wanted her to stay at home. She didn't resist, as she didn't feel comfortable in the capital city. The big city scared her. And she was even more afraid of working. Who was she here? Just another provincial woman trying to worm her way into high society? It was different for her husband, who quickly adapted to the big city. He had aspired to this all his life, and now his self-esteem was fulfilled every day. He was in his element. Viola shook her head, snapping out of her memories. Why am I sitting here, sulking like an old woman? I need to occupy myself with something. But what tasks could she do when she had nothing to do? She didn't need to clean. The cleaning service came every week. Cooking was also unnecessary, as her husband rarely ate at home these days. He spent more and more time at work and came home late. If he planned to eat at home, he would order food delivery from a restaurant, and Viola didn't even have to think about inventing what to cook next. Although she cherished the time when they lived in poverty, Viola often cooked, and her husband admired her culinary skills. She always made him breakfast, and he never refused to eat. And now, did she really want this? He had been behaving strangely lately. Viola even suspected that he had another woman. But he didn't smell of another cologne, and he didn't call her by someone else's name. Most likely, it was just a fruit of her sick imagination. And then the phone rang again, startling Viola. Oh, for heaven's sake! But this time it was her friend, whom they hadn't seen in a long time. Teresa used to work at a beauty salon where Viola went for manicures. But then she got lucky. She married a well-off man and stopped working. However, Viola and Teresa remained good friends and communicated regularly. Teresa invited her to have dinner at a restaurant in the evening, but Viola didn't know when Ciro would come home. After the conversation with her friend, Viola decided to call her husband. He probably wouldn't answer his mobile, so she dialed his office directly, hoping he would be available. But it wasn't him who picked up the phone, it was some girl. "I'm listening." "Hello, please call Ciro to the phone." Viola didn't expect what would happen next. "Oh my God, where do you all get his number? Who gave it to you? How many times do I have to tell everyone that it's his work number for contacting employees, not patients? You won't get a free consultation over the phone anyway. You need to schedule an appointment at the clinic. I'll have to tell Emilio to take care of this matter." Viola was stunned. Who was this girl scolding her over the phone without even knowing who was calling? "I'm sorry, I didn't know that calling this number was not allowed. But the thing is, my husband gave me this number and said I could call any time. I'm Ciro's wife." There was an awkward pause, and then the girl spoke in a different tone. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you. I didn't know it was you. I apologize. Ciro is busy. I'll let him know you called, and he'll call you back." And the girl hung up the phone. Viola thoughtfully bit her lip. Strange. What kind of behavior was that from this strange girl? And what was she doing in her husband's office? And why was she speaking so rudely? If she was one of the clinic's employees, she was behaving entirely inappropriately. And his assistant couldn't have answered like that either. However, Viola then pondered. Why did this strange girl call the clinic owner by name? And if she was in her husband's office, what was she doing there in his absence? Viola realized that her previous suspicions of infidelity were returning. How could she check everything? I really need to meet Teresa. Otherwise, I'll go crazy with these thoughts on my own. Viola decided to temporarily set aside thoughts of a possible mistress for her husband and called her friend. In the evening, she would talk to Teresa, perhaps she would advise her something or at least calm her down. In the evening, Viola arrived at the restaurant in a taxi. Teresa was already sitting at the table, waiting for her. The friend had become even thinner, and now, with her tall stature, she resembled a model. No one would have guessed that this girl used to work as a manicurist. Teresa had quickly adapted to the good life and learned to enjoy all the pleasures of a wealthy lifestyle. However, this woman was very intelligent and observant. She could find a way out of even the most terrible situations. When Teresa saw Viola, she jumped up from the couch and rushed to hug her. "Viola, I've missed you so much, darling. I'm so glad to see you, you have no idea. I'm ready to snuggle you to death. I hope you're free? I have big plans for tonight." Her white smile turned into a serious expression. Viola laughed. "Yes, I don't have a car. I came by taxi. I also want to relax tonight." Teresa immediately smiled again and tightly squeezed her friend's hands. "Great, everything is going according to plan. I like you particularly much today. Come on, sit closer to me. By the way, remind me to tell the restaurant administrator that these couches are simply marvelous. I haven't been this comfortable in a long time. And I especially like this corner. There's no one near us, no one will interrupt us having fun and gossiping." Teresa giggled loudly. Viola couldn't help but smile, looking at her energetic friend. Viola was not like that. Although there was a slight age difference between them, only 4 years, Teresa was 34 years old, but in terms of energy, Viola was much weaker. Apparently, it must be something inherent in a person. It was strange how such different women found common ground and became friends. But that's how it was. Teresa was radiant, full of emotions, and seemed like a young girl. Viola, on the other hand, was reserved like a typical mature woman. An hour and a half flew by unnoticed. The women had dinner and had 2 glasses of wine each. Teresa was the one doing most of the talking. Her active life was fascinating, and Viola listened to her with pleasure. Teresa vividly described each trip in such detail that Viola could envision every aspect. When the flow of stories dwindled, Teresa looked intently at her friend and, unusually softly, said, "I understand that you won't start talking on your own, huh? But I can see everything. There's something is going on with you, so you'd better tell me. I won't leave you alone. So, what's it? Health problems? Depression? Husband?" Viola realized that Teresa would still get to the truth eventually. It was better to ask her for advice right away. "It's because of my husband. Something is not right between us. But don't think I'm crazy. There's no evidence. It's just a feeling. My intuition never fails me, as sad as it sounds. I think he has another woman, but I'm just suspecting it without any proof." Teresa listened to her friend. Viola spoke nonstop about the clinic, his late arrivals home, silent phone calls, and his dismissive attitude. When she finished venting, she immediately felt relieved. "You know, now I understand that all of this is nonsense. I'm just inventing it out of boredom. I need to find something to occupy myself with, so I won't have time to search for evidence of something that doesn't even exist. I'm just being foolish." But Teresa didn't laugh and support her friend as Viola expected. She was very serious. Without a hint of a smile, she said, "Why do you think it's all made up? You know, I trust your intuition. I've known you for so long, and it has never failed you. We don't have enough time tonight to list all the moments. So, my dear, I suggest you think about it. And solving the problem of proving infidelity and loyalty is quite easy. It's not necessary to monitor the person yourself. There are professionals for that, Viola. They will do all the work precisely and quickly. It's not a cheap pleasure, rather quite expensive, but it's worth it, believe me. I have the contact of a good detective who could take on your case. I'll give it to you if you decide to go all the way." Viola bit her lip. The alcohol made Teresa's offer tempting. But how could Viola do such a thing to her husband? They had lived together for so many years, trusted each other, been there for each other for better or for worse. If she hired someone to spy on her husband, it would be the end of trust. And she had been proud they were honest with each other. "I need some fresh air. I'll be back soon." Viola stood up and headed towards the exit of the restaurant. Her head was slightly spinning, and she needed some fresh air. She thought she would quickly recover once outside. Teresa didn't follow her. She gave her the opportunity to be alone. Viola stood outside for about 5 minutes. It was already dark, and her mind cleared up a bit, and she calmed down. Just as she was about to enter the restaurant, someone called out to her. "Viola, is that you?" Viola startled and turned around. The voice was so familiar, and she carefully looked at the man standing in front of her. No, it couldn't be. It couldn't be. "Roberto?" Viola exclaimed in astonishment. The man before her smiled broadly and approached her closely. "You recognized me." Roberto suddenly embraced Viola tightly and spun her around. Viola gasped in surprise and then burst into laughter. She clung to her man's shoulders and closed her eyes, momentarily immersed in memories. Roberto was her high school love. They fell in love with each other in high school, and then their paths diverged. They've been in strongly love with each other for 2 years. The entire school knew about Roberto and them. Everyone was convinced it was true love, and they would never part ways. The students themselves made plans, envisioning a lifetime together. Any other way wasn't possible to imagine. Viola and Roberto's parents joked at the graduation party that they would soon have to plan a wedding. Everything was wonderful. But their plans fell through the moment Roberto didn't get into university and was sent to the military. After his service, he never returned to the town. His parents decided to move abroad, taking their son with them, and they disappeared. Contact between the two lovers was lost. Viola suffered for a few months, and then she realized that life goes on. She needed to move forward without Roberto, without the memories, without the suffering. And then she met her husband, and the past love simply faded away on its own. Viola never encountered Roberto again, as life scattered them in different directions. This unexpected encounter stirred something deep within Viola. Her heart was beating so strongly that it felt like it was right in her head. The alcohol she had consumed and the sudden rush of emotions made her head spin. She opened her eyes and pleaded, "Roberto, please, let me go. My head is already spinning. No, I can't let you go. It's simply incredible. How did we happen to meet in this city where I'm just passing through? Viola, it's fate. No, I can't let you go just like that. You must have dinner with me." "Oh no, I'm here with a friend, and I've already had dinner. And I need to go home, my husband will worry." Roberto immediately let her go. Viola's mention of her husband sobered him up, and he regained composure. "Husband, huh? Well, all right, if you're busy now, Viola, I really want to talk to you. Please, let's meet tomorrow. I'm begging you." Viola wanted to refuse, but her mind was still foggy. And she realized that she terribly wanted to talk to Roberto. After all, it wouldn't be a date, right? Just a meeting with a good friend from their youth, nothing more. And she agreed. They exchanged phone numbers, arranged to meet the next day, and Viola returned to her friend at the table. The conversation didn't flow anymore because Viola's head was in the clouds, and she reminisced about the encounter with Roberto, and soon the women went home. As Viola was leaving in a taxi, Teresa managed to shout to her, "Think about hiring a detective. If anything happens, you can count on me." The next day, Viola woke up late, and her husband was already not at home. When she returned from the restaurant the previous night, he wasn't home yet. Viola didn't wait for him and went to sleep. She heard him come in at night, but then she fell back asleep. And in the morning, he was gone without a trace. Viola realized that waking up early to see him off was pointless. He didn't need it at all. She sent Ciro a text message, informing him that she was meeting a friend in the evening. He read the message but didn't respond. Viola snorted, "Well, why bother texting back if you don't care? Fine then." The day passed unnoticed. Viola changed outfits several times, trying to find the right one. She didn't know what to do with her hair. Then she caught herself thinking that she was acting as if she were going on a date. "Viola, stop it. Why are you winding yourself up?" She scolded herself angrily. In the end, she didn't have time to change anymore. She was running late. As she rode in the taxi, it seemed like there were traffic jams everywhere, cars barely moving, and she thought she was terribly late. But she arrived 15 minutes early. However, Roberto was already sitting at the table. Apparently, he was afraid of being late too. When Viola approached the table, Roberto stood up to hug her. Today, Viola was very tense. She didn't know what this dinner held for her. They sat down, placed their orders, and then talked about this and that. Viola mentioned that she was married, that her husband was a highly respected doctor at a prestigious clinic. Roberto said he had never been married. As he uttered those words, he looked into Viola's eyes intently, and she felt flustered by his gaze. It was as if he was telling her that she was the reason for his loneliness. After they had a glass of wine each, Viola relaxed a little. They reminisced about their youth, school, and laughed at funny incidents, and Viola felt so good, as if she had returned home after a long absence. She remembered how being with Roberto always made her feel so happy and peaceful. But then an awkward pause arose. Roberto was looking at Viola, and she absent-mindedly rubbed the stem of her wine glass. "Have you ever thought about how our lives would have turned out if we hadn't broken up?" Roberto suddenly asked her. Viola flinched and became flustered. "But what is there to think about? We didn't succeed. Why should I think of something that couldn't happen?" She said. "But we planned so many things. We broke up not by our own choice. Everything was supposed to be different. I've been thinking about it my whole life, Viola. I don't believe you didn't think about it, Roberto responded. Viola looked away. Yes, she did think about it, of course. She was afraid to admit it to him. She loved him too much to simply forget about him. When she met Ciro, new feelings overwhelmed her. Her love for Roberto had settled deep within her soul, and for a while, she didn't think about him. But with each passing year, she thought more and more about how she was living a life that wasn't her own, that something else was meant for her, but she deviated from that path and now had to live a life that wasn't hers. The more she thought about it, the more she tried to rid herself of those thoughts. She chose her husband, she got married by her own desire, she wanted it. Lately, she wasn't satisfied with married life and she suspected her husband in infidelity. She realized that something needed to change, and it had to start with finding evidence of Ciro's faithfulness or infidelity. If he was loyal to her, then she made the right choice by marrying him. But if he was cheating on her, then it meant she was no longer needed. Viola looked at Roberto and sighed. Roberto, you're right, of course. Everything could have been different, but it turned out the way it did, and there's no point in speculating. I was glad to see you, but you'll be leaving soon. You're just a pleasant memory. I'm glad I met you, reminisced about our youth, but it's all in the past. We spent good time together, and then we'll forget again, she said. Roberto paled slightly, then whispered, I don't want to forget anything. Viola, don't you understand that I never forgot about you? I always loved you. You're the only one in the world for me. I never loved anyone else. I didn't get married because I always dreamed only of you. You were always on my mind. And I believe that we met again not just by chance. Fate itself brought us together again, but this time I won't miss my chance. Viola looked at Roberto in shock. Her heart pounded at a breakneck pace. She shook her head and said softly, Roberto, I'm married, that's all there is to it. I don't know what else to say to you. Viola, please, think about what I've said. I feel that things aren't going well for you in life. You have the face of an unhappy woman. After we spoke with each other, I understood that it's not due to a lack of money or health problems. You're unhappy because you're not heard, not understood. I can make you happy. I can take you with me. I'll always be by your side. I'll never let you go if you come with me. I love you, do you hear me? I truly love you. Roberto took Viola's hand, squeezed it, while she just looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes. Oh, how can she endure this? It's over, Roberto, it's too late. I can't leave my husband, I am faithful to him. We have been through so much together, we trust each other. I can't just walk away because you called me. I'm not like that, Roberto, you know that. Yes, I know you're not such type of a person. I love you too much to make you do something against your will, I don't need that. You have to want it yourself. I'm asking you to think about my words. I'll give you all the phone numbers I have. Wherever I am, in whatever city or country, I will definitely answer one of them. Please, if you change your mind, please call me. And I will come to pick you up from the other side of the world. Viola swallowed her tears. Was all this really happening to her? As Viola was going home in a taxi, she wasn't thinking about Roberto, she was thinking about her husband. She parted ways with Roberto on a touching note. He continued to assure her that he could change her life if she wanted. But Viola didn't want to destroy her current life, her family relationships, her marriage. Only if her husband hadn't already ruined everything himself. And for that, she had to find out everything on her own, without relying on chance. When Viola arrived home, she dialed Teresa's number. Hi. Listen, I thought about your offer. Give me the phone number of that person you were talking about. I'll still call him. I want to know everything, I'm tired of living in uncertainty. She called the detective the next day. They arranged a meeting, and a day later, Viola was sitting in his office. She barely found the right place. There was no sign on the door, and the building itself was unremarkable, as if the detective was hiding his whereabouts, and only those in the know could find him. Most likely, this person worked only through referrals. Otherwise, how could one explain that he didn't even advertise his services? Viola sat on a regular chair. She felt squeezed because she was very uncomfortable in this place. Across from her, the detective sat behind a desk. There was nothing on his desk except a thin black folder and a pen. Teresa said his name was Giorgio, but Viola was hesitant to address him by name. "Nice to meet you, Giorgio," she cautiously asked. "Nice to meet you," the detective replied after a short pause. He continued to carefully examine his potential client. Usually, if he didn't like the clients, he would immediately refuse his services, citing his busy schedule. Viola didn't belong to the category of people he primarily served. She didn't look like a wealthy woman searching for her runaway son or daughter. Nor did she resemble a deceived spouse. She was too modest and reserved, making it difficult to extract the necessary information from her, and there wasn't much money to be had either. He didn't like working with such people. He was more attracted to wealthy clients. However, Teresa vouched for her friend, telling the detective that the woman could pay the required amount without any problems. But she needed the help of a professional, so Giorgio agreed to meet with Viola. And when he saw her, he was amazed to discover that she resembled his deceased sister. Even before starting a conversation with Viola, he already knew that he would help her in memory of his sister and wouldn't even take any money from her, or maybe just a purely symbolic amount. Judging by the woman sitting in front of him, she wouldn't agree to him working for free. "Well, I'm listening," he said seriously. Viola was a bit flustered. She didn't know where to begin such conversations. How does one ask for a favor? Or should she immediately discuss payment? "Sorry, I don't know where to start," she said uncertainly. Giorgio continued to scrutinize her. Yes, it was clear that she was seeking such services for the first time. He would have to help her, or else she would run away without getting the necessary assistance. He spoke to her a bit more amiably. "First, tell me why you need to hire a detective, and then we'll figure things out as we go." "I need to find out if my husband is cheating on me or not," Viola quickly blurted out, before her courage left her. "Well, that's a pretty common case," Giorgio barely suppressed a smile. "No matter what's happening in the world, women always want to know that they are the only ones in a man's life." "Great, that's up my alley. Now, tell me why you suspect him, if there's any evidence. And then we'll move on to personal details, recording everything we need, personal information, work hours and location, the car he drives, when he leaves and comes back home. I need to know everything." Viola took a deep breath and began to tell her story. She spoke for a long time without pausing. Giorgio didn't look at her, he simply took notes. Viola spoke for so long that her mouth became dry. She paused for a moment, trying not to cough, and then Giorgio pulled out a flask and a glass from somewhere below. He brought it closer to Viola. She poured herself some water, drank it, and thanked the detective. Continuing to speak, Viola thought that everything wasn't as scary as she had imagined, and she was starting to feel somewhat calmer. When she finished speaking, she fell silent, waiting for questions from the detective. But after a minute, he closed his folder with notes and said, "Excellent, I don't have any more questions for you. You've laid it all out. You're very observant, you didn't miss a single detail, and you told me exactly what I needed to know, nothing more." Viola smiled timidly. "Well then, we can say goodbye for now. I think it won't be difficult for me to find out everything you're interested in. I have your phone number, and I'll call you in 2 weeks. What about the price? We still need to agree on the payment." Giorgio smiled slightly. "I'll take a small advance from you, and the rest after our cooperation is complete." The detective wrote something in a small notepad, tore out the sheet, and handed it to Viola. She looked at the paper and was surprised. "Is that all? I was told that your services are quite expensive. I thought even the advance payment would be higher." No, that's enough, and the remaining payment isn't too high either. The cost of my services depends on the complexity of the job. Checking on a husband is not considered a complex task, so the payment is accordingly lower. Besides, since you provided me with all the information, I don't need to spend time searching. Well, I bid you farewell. Expect my call. The detective stood up, indicating that the meeting was over. Viola bid him farewell and left the office. As she stepped out onto the street, she sighed with relief. The office had been stuffy, with all the windows tightly closed, as if the detective didn't want a single word to escape beyond the room. Viola got into her car and furrowed her brow. With all her problems and thoughts, she completely forgot about her husband's birthday, which was coming up this Saturday. How could she forget? What a shame. Viola shook her head and started the engine. Strangely enough, Ciro came home from work early today, or rather, on time. When Viola returned, he was already home. Viola raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Oh wow, you're home early today. I hope nothing's wrong," she said. Ciro frowned and looked at his wife. "What do you mean? Does something have to be wrong for me to come home on time?" "No, nothing special happened, just one operation got canceled." "Why?" Viola asked. Ciro grumbled with some irritation. The patient had some complications. The surgery can't be done at the moment, so they rescheduled it until the patient's health improves. "And what complications does the patient have?" Viola asked again. Ciro raised his voice in annoyance. "Why are you pestering me with all these questions? You don't understand anything about medicine. Why should I explain something you have no clue about? What's with the interrogation, Viola? You're starting to annoy me." Viola bit her lower lip, feeling offended. "But you used to talk to me, share things, communicate, and explain. What has changed now? Have I become dumb? Or am I not allowed to ask you anything anymore? Or are you doing something illegal? I don't understand, Ciro." Her husband immediately calmed down and tried to speak more gently. "Well, why are you imagining things? Of course, you haven't become dumb, and I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm just really tired, you have to understand. I work almost without weekends, with very little free time. I don't even feel like talking when I come home. And here you are bombarding me with a million questions. Well, not a million, just a few. And we're still a family. Maybe we need to talk sometimes, don't you think?" Viola replied. Ciro remained silent. Viola tried to calm herself down. "Okay, no need to get worked up right now. It's totally unnecessary." She needed to address another, more pressing issue. "I understand that you don't want to talk, you're tired and all. But I need to find out something, so you'll have to talk to me. It's your birthday on Saturday. Do you have any plans? Or are we going to spend the day together?" Ciro hastily replied. "Oh, I forgot to mention. I invited some colleagues from the clinic. Emilio won't be able to come, but everyone else will be there. So, we'll have a party on Saturday." "And when were you planning to tell me this? On Friday evening? Or would I have found out when all the guests showed up?" Viola flared up. "Oh, calm down, don't worry. I took care of everything. I ordered food in the restaurant, the table will be set. You just need to find helpers and hire a cleaning service. That's all I need from you." Viola looked at her husband. What was happening to him? He didn't seem like himself, speaking so casually. And it didn't turn out well with arranging the birthday party. She was a bit taken aback by the fact that she wasn't the one planning the party as the hostess of the house. Well, she needed to be patient. She would find out everything soon enough, and she would understand if there were any serious reasons to worry. All right, let's move on. How many people will be there? What should I prepare for? Viola asked. About 15 to 20 people. Don't worry, we'll fit. Thank God, we have plenty of space, Ciro replied. That was the end of their conversation. Viola didn't ask anything else, and Ciro didn't tell her anything more. They went to bed in complete silence. Ciro only wished her a good night briefly, and Viola responded in the same manner. What a wonderful married life! Viola decided to prepare for the celebration a few days in advance, or rather, to prepare herself. She went to a beauty salon. They colored her hair and gave her a slight haircut. She had her nails done with red polish. She even had eyelash extensions, though with a natural effect, but it was progress. Teresa complimented her when she saw her on the eve of Ciro's birthday. Well, my friend, you surprised me. I've never seen you so dazzling before. You've outdone yourself. Bravo. Now you just need to pick a dress, Teresa said. I have a dress. I bought it last year, but I haven't used it once. I think it will go well with my look, Viola replied. Teresa nodded in satisfaction. Well, my friend, you're making me happy. Tell me, did the detective call yet? Any news? Viola frowned. No, there's still no news. He's supposed to call in the middle of next week. I'm a bit anxious, Teresa. What awaits me? In reality, Viola was extremely nervous. She hoped that the detective wouldn't bring her any bad news. But if he did, then what? Viola, that's life, you can handle anything. But I believe everything will be fine, and you're worrying for no reason, Teresa reassured her. I hope so, Viola smiled, but her heart was uneasy. Saturday arrived. Ciro was right, he had arranged everything perfectly, and Viola had nothing to worry about. The preparations for the evening were quite hectic, but they were trivial matters. The only thing that scared Viola was that she didn't know anyone among the guests. And why did Ciro organize the party at home? They could have gathered at a restaurant. Why did Ciro want to gather everyone at home? Everyone gathered. Champagne was flowing like a river, buffet tables were covered with appetizers, and laughter filled the air. Ciro introduced Viola to some of the guests, and then she seized the moment and rushed into the bedroom to catch her breath. Looking at herself in the mirror, Viola sighed. Yes, she thought she would shine in this dress, but she had no idea what attire the other guests would be wearing. Compared to the glamorous dresses of other women, her dress seemed too plain and dull. Ciro didn't say anything about her appearance. However, his gaze carefully scanned her face, and then he whispered, "What's wrong with your eyes?" Viola responded with confusion. "I built up eyelashes." "Why?" "Look at you, always coming up with something. You've never done that before. Why did you put them on now? It doesn't suit you, take them off tomorrow. You look like a cheap doll from an antique shop." Well, Viola didn't expect such compliments from her husband. It hurt her, but she held back. She didn't say anything to her husband, she simply shrugged and walked away. And now, standing in her bedroom, she wanted to burst into tears. She wanted to rip off all the jewelry, take off the dress, mess up her hair, wipe off her makeup, and tear off those damn eyelashes. But she held back. The celebration wasn't over, and Viola didn't want to embarrass herself in front of everyone. The last thing she needed was to be discussed and labeled as the crazy wife of a surgeon in the clinic. Viola calmed down and stepped out of the bedroom. When she entered the hall, she saw another guest next to Ciro. She hadn't been there before, maybe she had just arrived. She was a young girl, and she was so dazzling that any woman that was present here paled in comparison. The girl had long black hair that flowed down her shoulders and almost reached her waist. Apparently, she had not only royal blood flowing in her veins, but something else as well. Her tan skin shimmered in the light. She was very slender but with beautiful curves. The deep neckline on her chest indicated her best asset, and Viola suspected that this asset was not entirely natural. Her plump lips were covered in transparent gloss, and she kept biting her lower lip during her conversation with Ciro. Then the girl adjusted her hair, sweeping her mane forward, and Viola almost gasped in astonishment. The dress was even more revealing from behind than from the front, completely open back down to the upper part of her buttocks. It created an impression that the girl was half naked. It was unbelievable. Viola had never seen such a revealing dress on anyone before. It left no room for imagination or fantasy. Just moving a strap of the dress slightly to the side could lead to irreversible consequences. Ciro was enthusiastically talking to the girl, looking directly into her eyes, while the beauty occasionally laughed, throwing her head back or leaning forward. As a result, her low neckline moved in different directions, revealing her chest even more, though there was hardly any room left for more exposure. Viola frowned. Who was this? Only her husband's colleagues were there, but this girl resembled a fashion model, not a doctor or, especially, a nurse. It was all so strange. Then Ciro stepped away from the girl, smiling at her. Viola had been waiting for this. She immediately approached her husband and asked, "Who is she?" Ciro pretended not to understand. "What are you talking about?" "Don't pretend you don't understand, Ciro. You know who I'm talking about. You were just standing with the dark-haired girl. Who is she? Does she work at your clinic?" "Ah, that girl. Yes, she works at our clinic. She's a doctor." "And what's her name?" "Why do you need her name?" Ciro asked, frowning. Viola looked closely at her husband. He was behaving suspiciously, reacting strangely to her questions, and seemed nervous all the time. "Why are you saying such nonsense?" "Of course, I know her name. Her name is Alba, and she didn't come for no reason. I invited her. She's just a little late." "Alba," Viola said thoughtfully, looking at the girl. "How old is she?" "She's so young." Ciro answered irritably. "How would I know how old she is? I have no interest in that. Probably somewhere around 23 to 25, I don't know exactly. Why does it matter to you? Don't we have anything else to talk about?" "You amaze me, Viola." And Ciro walked away from her. Viola had been observing Alba. So young and already a doctor. Isn't that strange? Her husband had to work for many years to achieve success and respect, and this Alba is working in a prestigious clinic at such a young age. Who hired her there? Maybe she's someone's daughter? Alba was talking to many people, and everyone treated her with respect. Apparently, she truly has authority in that clinic, and she deserves it. Viola noticed something else. It was evident that Alba was searching for someone among the guests, and she kept looking at the small watch on her wrist as if she were in a hurry. And then Viola understood the reason for it. About an hour later, Ciro approached her. It was already late, and the guests should have been dispersing, but everyone seemed to be waiting for something. Ciro said to his wife, "Darling, there's something going on. It turns out Emilio prepared another gift for me, and it was a surprise. I had no idea, and no one did. He arranged a private party at the nightclub just for the company's employees, and he bought a ticket for each one of them. And now we're going to this party. It's late, of course, but I can't refuse. Unfortunately, I can't take you with me because you don't have a ticket, and you never liked nightclubs anyway, right? You can rest, and the guests won't bother you. It's getting late. We're leaving now. A limousine will pick us up, arranged by Emilio. That's what I call a boss. And you relax. You need some rest. You've been quite agitated lately." Viola listened to her husband in astonishment, not daring to believe her ears. A party? Nightclub? Is everyone going to have fun? I thought we would spend the rest of the evening together. I haven't given you all of your gifts yet. I have one more. What about me? Viola asked. Well, dear, you have to understand. I see you every day, but I rarely meet with my boss. I can't refuse the party. Emilio would consider it a personal offense. Do you want me to have problems later? Are you dissatisfied with my position? Don't you know that I should be grateful to Emilio for being the key to my career? If I refuse the gifts from the management, I will quickly lose respect and trust. Those are the rules in the modern world. You don't understand anything about it. Why do I even tell you everything? Indeed, why? You can just leave me and go with your colleagues, and I'll wait for you until morning. Is that what you're planning to do? Viola got angry. But Ciro hugged her waist and whispered softly, "Why are you so upset? I'm not going to stay there till morning. I'll spend an hour or two and then go home. Don't worry, I won't stay long. I just need to make an appearance and show that I appreciate this gesture from Emilio. You go and rest. Your eyes are red, you're tired." Ciro kissed his wife on the cheek and then walked away. 10 minutes later, no one was left in the house. They all bid farewell and left. As they went out onto the street, Viola could hear joyful shouts and cheering from the party. Apparently, everyone was excited about the event. It seemed more interesting than being at home. Why was this happening? Why did she increasingly find herself on the outskirts of her husband's life? Why was she always on the sidelines? After all, she was the wife of a prestigious surgeon. But Viola tried not to despair. She still hoped for the best. Maybe it was for the best that Ciro left. She would prepare herself and greet him properly. She would put on the new lingerie she bought from a fashionable women's store. Granted, it was very provocative and unusual, and she wasn't used to wearing something like that, but Teresa assured her that it was exactly what she needed. "Viola, this is what you need. I'm sure Ciro will adore it. Any man would. But you're a faithful wife, so make your husband happy and don't be shy. Do you think men shouldn't be surprised? They should, and very much so. So don't hesitate, take this set of this underwear, and let's end the discussion." Viola retrieved the lingerie. Yes, it was very beautiful. She hoped that wearing it wouldn't be in vain. She took a bath with fragrant foam, washed her hair, put on the lingerie. According to Ciro's promise, he should be back any minute now. Well, she would wait for him in the bedroom. She turned on the night lamp, lay on the bed, and waited. However, 30 minutes passed, and her husband was still absent. Another 30 minutes went by. It was already around 3 in the morning, and Viola fell asleep. She woke up around 5 in the morning, and Ciro was still not home. She started calling him, but his phone was unavailable. She called him for half an hour, but there was no result. She started to worry and then realized that she didn't have a single phone number of any of the clinic staff to call in an emergency. What if something happened to him and no one notified her? What if he was in the hospital and they couldn't reach her? Or what if he was in an accident, lying somewhere on the road? Oh God, what an horror! She had to do something urgently, or she would go crazy. Viola threw on a robe and was about to call the city hospital when she heard some noise in the hallway. She went out and saw that Ciro had returned. "Where have you been? Why didn't you call? Did something happen? I was so worried while waiting for you. Why didn't you answer my calls?" Viola shouted. Ciro raised an eyebrow and calmly replied, "Why are you yelling like that? I told you we were going to the club, nothing else happened. I didn't answer your calls because the connection was bad and I thought you were sleeping. I didn't want to wake or bother you. What happened that made you so nervous? Everything is fine. I came back home." Viola became even more agitated. "But you said you wouldn't be there for long. I was waiting for you. You could have left the club and called me, let me know you'd be late. You promised me you would come back soon. How can you treat me like this? Why are you turning this into a tragedy? I've stayed overnight at work many times when there were special cases or urgent surgeries. What's the big deal? So, I was delayed, no big deal. When I'm delayed at work, you don't yell like this. I couldn't leave, Emilio wouldn't let me. We had some fun, and then we discussed clinic matters. It's crucial for me. I couldn't just get up and leave. Stop overreacting, Viola. What kind of matters can you discuss in a nightclub? Do you think I'm a fool? Viola exclaimed. Ciro took off his shirt and casually threw it on a chair. He smirked slightly and calmly said, Viola, you're like from another world. We had a VIP room reserved in the nightclub. Our company was the only one there. There were no outsiders. We only went out to the main hall if we wanted to dance. The rest of the time we sat in a separate room away from noise and crowds. That's where we talked. What's so unusual about that? Relax, you're too nervous. Maybe you should see a doctor? Perhaps you're going through menopause? It's serious. You need help. It's not something to joke about. Viola stared at her husband and didn't know what to say. Menopause? She was only 38. She was still young. Why was he saying such hurtful things? She couldn't take her eyes off Ciro. He was composed. He wasn't staggering like a drunk. He was completely rational. Of course, she didn't have menopause yet, but it wouldn't hurt to treat her nerves. Every little thing was driving her crazy, and she could feel herself on the brink of hysteria. Her constant suspicions were driving her mad, and she couldn't take it anymore. She needed to see a doctor and get prescribed some tranquilizers. Otherwise, she would surely destroy her family herself, not because of unproven suspicions of her husband's infidelity, which she only suspected. Men who cheat don't behave so calmly. They lie, twist the truth, get nervous and anxious. But Ciro was calm, smiling, looking her in the eyes. He was even humming a tune as he undressed. It was evident that he was just relaxed and had a good time, and now he was satisfied. And her? She was going crazy, tormenting herself. What a fool she was. She really needed qualified medical help. I was afraid for you, worried. By the way, I prepared a surprise for you. I put on new lingerie, Viola said softly and, blushing, untied her robe. But Ciro, glancing at her briefly, immediately looked at her with regret in his eyes. Oh, dear, that's so sweet, but I'm so tired. Let's postpone it for later. Someday you'll show it to me, just not now. This night drained me. I'm so exhausted that my eyes are closing. If I don't lie down in bed right now, I'll fall asleep right here on the floor. So let's go to sleep and talk tomorrow. Ciro put on her robe, kissed her cheek, and went to the bedroom, leaving Viola standing, watching him go. Then she sighed and looked around herself. How lonely she felt in this house. How she longed to be in someone's warm embrace. How necessary it was to be needed by someone. Why did she feel so bad? Why did she sense the impending disaster was coming? The constant anxiety was driving her crazy. It was impossible to be in tension all the time. How much longer could she endure? Viola drank some water, placed a glass on the table. In the silence, a sharp knock resounded, making her startle. Viola approached the window, tightly wrapped her robe, which didn't warm her, but it didn't help her. She couldn't calm down or warm up. She looked out the window, and there was no one outside. Only occasional brief barks of a dog could be heard somewhere. Viola sighed and went to sleep. She would take a sleeping pill, lie down next to her soundly sleeping husband. And tomorrow, she would calm down and smile at her husband again, hoping for his attention. She no longer knew what she wanted, but she felt that the resolution was coming. Viola seemed to have a premonition the day before that something would happen soon. When she got up in the morning, her husband was already gone. Viola glanced at the clock and frowned. It was already noon. She had never woken up so late. Apparently, the sleeping pills took effect. Her head was throbbing strongly from them, or from a sleepless night, or from all the anxieties. Viola drank water from the glass on the bedside table and wanted to lie down again, but then she noticed that her phone screen was flashing. Someone was calling, but she didn't hear it because the phone was on silent mode. Oh, let them call. She didn't want to talk to anyone. She took the phone in her hand to turn it off completely, but saw something that quickly brought her to her senses. The screen displayed 10 missed calls from Giorgio, the detective she had entrusted to keep an eye on her husband. There were also 5 messages from him. Wow! He had been calling her all morning, and she was dozing off without a care. He must have had something important to tell her with so many calls. Viola immediately snapped out of any remaining sleep, and her head stopped throbbing. She dialed the detective's number and called him back. He took a long time to answer, and Viola nervously crumpled the sheet with her damp hand. And then Giorgio finally responded. "I see you're very eager for news, Viola. Good morning, or rather, day." Viola, smiling to herself, nervously spoke apologetically. "Hello, Giorgio. I'm sorry, I was occupied. I was very occupied. I actually forgot my phone at home. I just arrived. When I saw your calls and messages, I immediately called you back." Giorgio laughed. His laughter was unsettling. It was the laughter of someone who knows other people's secrets. "Viola, you seem to have forgotten who you're talking to. Let me remind you. I'm a detective, and I know many things about all sorts of people, from ordinary individuals to the most famous ones in the city. I've been sitting in my car outside your house since 7 in the morning. I saw your husband leave, and I saw that you haven't entered or exited the house just now. That means you've been home all this time. Well, unless it implies that you didn't spend the night at home, but that's unlikely. Otherwise, I would have known from your husband's expression that you weren't there. And since he left in a good mood, it means you were in your own house." Viola shivered, feeling a chill run down her spine. She trembled and sighed, saying, "Yes, you're right, I was sleeping. I took sleeping pills, put my phone on silent mode, and slept until noon. I just woke up now and saw your missed calls. I apologize for this senseless and foolish lie." "Oh no, don't apologize. You don't need to apologize to me. I simply wanted to show you that even the smallest lie can be exposed to others. Always be cautious. Either don't lie or lie only when you're certain your lies won't be exposed." Viola stared at a fixed point, engrossed in the detective's words. What a strange person, but his voice was mesmerizing. Viola felt a sense of calmness, as if she had undergone a hypnotic session. She slowly exhaled. "All right, let's put this behind us. I believe you understood me correctly and will heed the advice of an expert in the future. Now, let's focus on the present. I'm ready to provide you with my report. I believe I've gathered enough information for you, and I would like you to review it as soon as possible. I have a client who urgently needs my assistance. I've resolved your case, and I'd like to move on to the next one as soon as I can. I'll be waiting for you in the car in half an hour. I believe that should be enough time for you to take a shower, freshen up, and have a cup of coffee." "Excellent, I'll be waiting for you outside." Viola glanced out the window. There were no cars nearby. What a peculiar person. However, Viola didn't dwell on his eccentricities. She was more concerned about the information the detective had obtained for her. Would her married life end or continue here? Or was it all a web of deception, and the detective would once again confirm that? In any case, she would soon find out. Viola quickly headed to the shower. She stepped outside 20 minutes later. Her head had stopped feasting after the shower, and she felt refreshed after a strong cup of coffee. Viola surveyed the area and noticed a car not far away. The headlights flashed, and then the car moved from its spot, pulling up next to Viola. The front door of the car opened, and Viola sat down beside the driver. "Well, hello, Viola, you look lovely." Viola frowned. "Did you find out everything I asked for?" "I still haven't had breakfast. Let's go to a place where I can grab a bite, and you can review my materials without any interruptions." 25 minutes later, they were sitting at a table in an inconspicuous cafe where students usually stopped for a quick snack. They settled in a corner where they were hardly noticeable. Giorgio brought the tray of food himself and then placed a folder with documents in front of Viola. She took a deep breath before opening it. There were many handwritten papers inside, neatly written. It was strange that the detective didn't use a computer. Or perhaps he intentionally wrote everything himself to give it more value. There were also many photographs of varying quality. Viola tremblingly picked up one of them. In this photo, Ciro was wearing a white medical suit. He stood at the entrance of a clinic, with a girl with long black hair standing next to him. Apparently, they were having a conversation. Ciro smiled, looking at the woman. Viola set the photo aside and took the next one. The girl was now looking almost at the camera, wearing large black glasses. Viola didn't know who she was. In the next photo, Viola saw Ciro in a restaurant. There was a long red rose on the table next to his hand. Ciro was alone, but his pensive gaze indicated that he was waiting for someone. Well, the next photograph put everything in its place. The photo was taken in the same cafe. However, this time, Ciro and the same dark-haired woman were sitting at the table. Viola saw the woman's face. It was Alba, a staff member at the clinic and a doctor. She was wearing a revealing dress that accentuated her artificial breasts. Alba held a rose in her hands and smiled tenderly at Ciro. Viola looked up at the detective, who calmly enjoyed his breakfast. "She's a doctor at my husband's clinic," she told him for some reason. The detective looked at her, finished chewing, took a sip of water, and said, "She doesn't work at the clinic." "What do you mean she doesn't work there?" "Ciro told me that." "Your husband said she works as a doctor at the clinic, and I understood, but that's not true. Although she's connected to the clinic somehow." The detective stared intently at Viola and remained silent. The woman was starting to lose her patience. "What do you mean?" she asked. Giorgio quietly said, "She's Alba, the wife of the clinic owner, Emilio Navarro." Silence stretched out in the air. Viola looked at the photo again. Emilio's wife, of all people. Ciro was deceiving her. He brought this woman into their home, without fearing that Viola might find out about their relationship. The detective settled more comfortably in his chair and continued speaking. "Alba is 23 years old. Your husband has been in a relationship with her for 2 years. No one knows about their relationship. These photos were taken in a restaurant, in the VIP room where outsiders are not allowed. Don't ask me how I managed to get these pictures, it's my business and my secrets. I had to do my job, and I did it. Don't ask me how I know they've been in a relationship for 2 years, I won't tell you that either. But they have been lovers for a long time, that's a fact. Your husband doesn't know about Alba's double life, and apparently, you didn't know either. This couple often spends time together at a hotel where they maintain complete secrecy. Emilio often travels to different cities and countries. When he's away, your husband often visits Alba at her home. I caught such a moment, there are photos, take a look. Your husband, of course, disguised himself, but I know it's him. And you'll recognize him too, I'm sure." She took out the next photo. In this photo, a taxi stopped there in front of a large mansion, and a man wearing sunglasses stood next to the car. It was Ciro, the detective was right. "I took this picture before your husband's birthday, take a look at the next photo. Here your husband is carrying a dress in a bag from a fashionable store. He came to his lover to give her the dress. She was wearing that dress in your house. And here's the next picture, it's Saturday, yesterday. The whole group of friends who were at your celebration. Tell me, what did your husband say yesterday when he left with everyone and you stayed home?" Viola whispered barely audibly, looking at the photos. "He said that Emilio arranged a surprise for him, that they were going to a nightclub to have fun and socialize with colleagues, and that only invitation tickets were allowed there, and I wouldn't be allowed in." The detective smirked, although he seemed to sympathize the woman. "Your husband deceived you, and you didn't notice. They did go to the nightclub together, but your husband organized the party, not Emilio. They didn't need invitation tickets to enter, it was open to the public. And Ciro didn't stay there for long. Half an hour later, he left with Alba to a hotel where they stayed almost until morning. Viola, your husband spent the entire night with his lover. As soon as he left the hotel, I immediately printed the photos and came to your house. Viola was crushed. She wasn't prepared for such betrayal from the person she had lived with for so long. She closed her eyes to prevent tears from streaming down her cheeks, but it didn't help. Just a moment, excuse me, I need to step away, she said, getting up from the table. She didn't know how she found the restroom, but she managed. She cried so hard, but immediately stopped herself. What was she doing? She had been deceived, betrayed, trampled upon, destroyed, and here she was crying. She needed to pull herself together to decide what to do next. And then she thought of Roberto. How he looked at her when they accidentally met. That look said a lot. Ciro hadn't looked at Viola like that in a long time. But she recognized that look in the photos. Now Ciro was looking at another woman, at Alba, at his boss's wife. Viola looked at herself in the mirror. She couldn't do anything else. Her marriage ended today. It ended the moment she saw the photos of Ciro and his mistress. Viola washed her face and carefully wiped it with a handkerchief she pulled out of her purse. Taking a deep breath, she put on her sunglasses and left the restroom. She returned to the table where the detective frowned upon seeing her wearing sunglasses but said nothing. He preferred it when people didn't wear glasses, as it allowed him to observe their reactions. People love drama. His clients often put on elaborate performances when they discovered betrayal or deceit. Viola, however, was different. She chose to conceal her emotions, hiding in the restroom. All the documents are in the folder with various meeting details. There's also all the information about Alba. And you haven't seen the hotel photos yet. They turned out to be quite interesting, the detective said. Viola interrupted him. I got it. Thank you for your help. I'm very satisfied with your work. How much do I owe you? I have some cash with me, but I can transfer the required amount to your card. The detective lowered his gaze. I'm also pleased with my work. I've never managed to gather all the necessary information so quickly. And you don't owe me anything. I did this for you without expecting payment. Don't ask for the reasons. There are some, but I won't disclose them to you. I'm sorry. Everything I found and gathered is in this folder. I've given it to you, and I hope we won't meet again. My services are very expensive, but I would prefer not to take money from you, so I hope you won't need my services. No, I won't need anything else. I'll be leaving soon, leaving here for good, Viola replied in a steady tone. The detective raised an eyebrow. This woman continued to surprise him. From their first encounter, it was clear that she hoped her suspicions wouldn't be confirmed. But she quickly accepted the circumstances and was ready to rebuild her life. Well, that was wonderful. Thank you, you've helped me a lot. I won't try to dissuade you from refusing the money. I see that your decision is final. Good luck to you, goodbye, Viola said. She gathered all the papers and photos into the folder, then stood up and left. The detective watched her pensively as she walked away. Viola called a taxi. While waiting for the car, she pondered what she was going to do next. She had decided to seek revenge on the man she loved, the man she trusted, the man to whom she had devoted the best years of her life. The decision came suddenly as she looked at herself in the mirror in the restroom. She deserved happiness, not all of this. No one could control her life except herself. When Viola arrived home, Ciro greeted her. Where have you been? I was running errands. Why? Ciro shrugged. Nothing. I'm going to work in my office, and then I'll need to go out for some errands. I'll be back late. And Ciro sat down at the computer. Viola had already come up with a plan for revenge. When her husband left for his business, she would put her plan into action. She sat in the bedroom, took out the folder given to her by the detective, and looked through the photos she hadn't seen before. They were from the hotel. She didn't spend much time examining them because they disgusted her. She hurriedly put them back in the folder. And then she noticed a small flash drive. She plugged it into her personal laptop. The flash drive contained all the photos the detective had provided. Well, that made her task easier. A couple of hours later, Ciro left. Before leaving, he took a shower and put on cologne. Viola realized he was going to see Alba. She noticed everything now. After he left, Viola went into his office. She opened his email. There it was. She found that folder containing email addresses of all the clinic employees and, most importantly, Emilio's address. Well, it was time to have some fun. Let's see how you like this, Ciro, Viola said aloud. Viola uploaded all the photos of Alba and Ciro and sent them to all the clinic employees. But then she felt it wasn't enough. She sent those photos to all of Ciro's contacts. It was done. Ciro came back 3 hours later. It was already late in the evening. He didn't say anything to his wife, and it was evident that no one had called him yet. Well, everything would be known tomorrow. Ciro went to bed, and Viola sat in the kitchen for a long time. She placed a chair by the window. The woman drank coffee, looked out the window, and contemplated her life. In the morning, Ciro went to work, and half an hour later, he called Viola. "Viola, I'm in big trouble," he yelled when she answered his call. "What do you mean?" Viola calmly asked. "You can't even imagine what happened." "Ciro, what's the matter? Explain it to me." Ciro roared into the phone. "I've been set up. God, everyone received some strange photos that were photoshopped. Someone hacked my email and sent provocative pictures to all the clinic employees. And not just the employees. Oh my God, it's a nightmare. What's happening here?" Ciro said something else, but Viola didn't pay much attention. Then she quietly said, "I did it." "What? What did you say?" "I didn't get it," Ciro asked. Viola said louder, "I said I did it, Ciro. I sent those photos. And you know they're not fake, right? I know the whole truth, Ciro. And now you'll pay for everything you've done." Within a moment, Ciro yelled at Viola, "What have you done, you fool? Where did you get those pictures? Who the hell slandered me? You understand that all of this is untrue?" "What? Is that untrue? Are you saying it's a lie? Just as much of a lie as Alba being a clinic doctor? I know who she is. Emilio's wife. I have only 2 questions for you. How could you bring your mistress into our home? And why didn't you just divorce me if I'm no longer needed? If we had simply separated, none of this would have happened. But you shamelessly lied to me for several years. You slept with this young girl while I waited for you at home every day. You mocked me, said hurtful words. Once you were willing to keep me in your hands. Why, when everything changed, didn't you just talk to me? We could have parted by mutual agreement. But you betrayed my trust. You're a scoundrel, Ciro, and I don't regret what I did at all. Let everyone know who you really are. And most importantly, let Emilio find out about it. I think he'll deal with you the way you deserve," and Viola hung up the phone. Ciro heard the dial tone and threw his phone against the wall with all his might. It shattered into several pieces across the office. Ciro growled again, like a wounded beast, and slumped back into his chair. He closed his eyes and rested his head on the desk, covering it with his hands. He came to work today in a good mood, but everyone greeted him unfriendly. Many colleagues whispered behind his back, a few didn't even say hello, and his assistant looked at him with fear in her eyes. "What happened today, Nora? Did I miss something interesting?" "Everyone's acting so strange," Ciro cheerfully asked as he walked into his office. But the assistant wasn't as cheerful as before. She stammered nervously. "Oh, Ciro, I don't know what to say. And, in general, I prefer not to participate in gossip. I'll leave, call me if you need anything." and she rushed out of the office, startled. Ciro shrugged. What's with everyone today? But half an hour later, Emilio walked into his office. Ciro smiled warmly when he saw his boss. He reached out his hand for a handshake but received a punch in the face instead. And then Emilio said everything he thought of him, and Ciro realized that somehow the boss had found out about him and Alba. But that wasn't all. As a parting shot, the boss said, "You don't work here anymore. You're fired. I did a favor for a friend, hired you, provided you with patience, gave you a fantastic income, and you scum, spat in my face, taking what belongs to me. You humiliated me. No one dares to touch my wife. And you dared to lay a hand on her. Now you're nobody here. You won't be able to find a job anywhere. I will ruin your reputation in such a way that no one will want to work with you. I have great authority. I will ensure that you never work in any city again. You won't even be hired as a janitor. Do you hear me? You've signed your death sentence. I don't know who played a prank on you, sending those photos to everyone from your email, but I'm glad that person was found. Now everyone will know that you're the scum of the earth. Gather your things and get out of here. I don't want to see you here in an hour." And Emilio left, slamming the door so hard that it knocked Ciro's certificate off the wall. Ciro immediately opened his laptop and checked his email. Oh God, there were a bunch of sent messages to all his contacts. Ciro stifled a groan and opened one of the messages, and there he saw photos of himself and Alba. What a horror! Someone had played this dirty trick on him and ruined his life. And that someone turned out to be his own wife. It was a complete disaster. This is a fiasco, man, Ciro whispered. As he gathered his things, not a single person entered his office. The surgery scheduled for the day would be performed by someone else, most likely his rival. Well, that's a great way to end a career. When he left the clinic, not a single person looked at him, no one said goodbye, no one even gave him a farewell handshake. They all smiled at him when he was a successful surgeon, and they all turned away when he was covered in dirt. Meanwhile, Viola was packing her things. She quickly finished with that. Calling a taxi, she took one last look at her home, where she had been both happy and unhappy. She would never cross the threshold of this house again. It was no longer their cozy nest. It was just a house, an ordinary house where another family might soon live. Perhaps they would be happier here than Viola and Ciro. Viola went to a hotel. Renting a room, she immediately called Teresa and told her everything. Teresa quickly realized that Viola needed help, but Viola only asked for the lawyer's contact information. "I'm filing for divorce, Teresa. And I'm starting a new life. Don't worry, I'm fine, even better than before, so don't worry. I just need to settle a couple of matters, and then I'll tell you everything in order." Viola called the lawyer, resolved a few divorce-related issues. Tomorrow she would go to court with him, sign a power of attorney, and do everything to finalize the divorce without her presence in court. Everything can be done with money, and fortunately, she had plenty of it. She had a personal account where Ciro regularly deposited large sums, and Viola hardly spent anything. A decent amount had accumulated there, enough to support her for the time being, and then she would have a different life. She would take care of that. She picked up the phone again and called someone, but no one answered. She dialed another number, also no answer. Viola sighed and dialed the last number. On the third ring, someone answered. "Hello, Roberto. It's me. Did you recognize me?" "Of course, I did. Roberto, I'm calling to say. Roberto, I'm filing for divorce. I'm leaving my husband, he betrayed me. I can't stay in this city anymore. Is what you said still true? If so, I agree, Roberto. I want to see you as soon as possible. How foolish I was, Roberto, forgive me." Ciro was standing by the window in his house. He hadn't left the house for a week. His home phone was constantly ringing, but he eventually smashed the receiver. Now there was silence in the house. His new mobile phone was on silent mode. There were also hundreds of missed calls and messages there, but Ciro only responded to a few. Through the messages, he learned that Viola had filed for divorce. Alba called him only once, the day after the incident. She screamed into the phone. "Emilio kicked me out of the house, Ciro, can you imagine? He kicked me out in disgrace. He took all the jewelry. He took everything. I'm out of money. A friend took me in. I'm in shock. How could this happen? Who was watching us? Did Emilio suspect something? It's my wife. Somehow she found out about us." "Your wife? Are you kidding me? She's a monster. Just a monster. She ruined my life. Oh God, what should I do now? I have nothing. How will I live? What a disgrace. What a horror." Ciro tried to calm his lover. "Calm down, Alba, don't worry, everything will be fine. Come to my place. My wife left, she filed for divorce. You can live with me now." "With you? Live with you? Are you out of your mind? Who are you? A doctor who can't even work anymore. You're nothing without Emilio. An empty space. Do you hear me? You're a nobody. You and your disgusting wife. Both of you, go to hell. I don't want to hear anything about you anymore. You don't exist to me anymore. Don't even say goodbye. And never appear in my life again." And she hung up. Ciro carefully placed the phone on the table. He had just bought it, he couldn't break it. Now he had to think about not having any income. And what to do next, where to go, he didn't know. He closed his eyes and groaned with hurt and helplessness. A month passed. Viola stood at the airport, she had just arrived. She couldn't believe she was in Paris. She had never been to Europe, and here she was, in Paris. Oh God! She was afraid to move. Viola looked around and suddenly saw someone ahead. She timidly smiled, but couldn't move from her spot. Roberto approached her closely, holding a huge bouquet of flowers. He smiled, looking into her eyes. "Well, hello, madam. I'm very glad to see you. I've been waiting for this moment, probably my whole life. May I take your hand? I'll show you Paris." Viola hugged him tightly around the neck and closed her eyes. "I've never been anywhere. I've never been to France. Why does it feel like I've come home?" Roberto embraced her and whispered in her ear. "You've never been anywhere? Then, my love, I'll gladly show you the whole world. We have our whole lives ahead of us." Viola held onto the shoulders of the man who once took a place in her heart and never left. Yes, it will be like that, she has no doubt about it.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.